Good morning. It's been a long time since I did one of these. I don't know if my audience even remembers them. They were called Expose Evergreen. There was like 100 and some odd episodes I did going through all of the raw primary source material for the Evergreen State College 2017 meltdown and then the aftermath of that. And, COVID happened and other things happened. I kind of lost interest in what they were doing. They got a new president who was just basically a watered down version of the previous president. And this current president's name is John Carmichael. He sent a message to the Evergreen community. Let's see what the date is here. May 8th or so. So a couple of days ago. So Evergreen, not to be outdone by other prestigious universities such as Columbia, and I don't know where else this stupidity is going on with the whole encampments and stuff. Evergreen students felt the need to also encamp on Red Square, and they issued a bunch of demands, and then John Carmichael, eventually persuaded by the deafness of their argumentation, has bowed or ceded to their demands. First, he gave a Memorandum of Understanding between the Evergreen State College and the Evergreen Gaza Solidarity Encampment. The Evergreen State College, quote-unquote Evergreen, and Evergreen Gaza Solidarity Encampment hereby enter into this Memorandum of Understanding and Agreement as of April 30, 2024. Whereas Evergreen is a public college of the state of Washington, whereas Evergreen has investment policies dated 2013 and has certain investments held by the University of Washington, whereas in the course of its operations, Evergreen applies for and receives grant funding, whereas Evergreen Gaza Solidarity Encampment has been established to exercise a student's First Amendment rights to speech and protest, and the members of the negotiating team have come here in good faith and looking for a successful resolution. Now, hereby, the parties agree as follows. Engage in college-wide governance to address the following issues. The college will charge 4 committees to begin work in spring on 4 policy questions. These committees will publish quarterly reports on their progress. I wonder how long they'll be around. The GSU will appoint up to 3 students to each committee. The Faculty Agenda Committee will be asked to appoint 2 faculty to each committee. The president will appoint staff members on the committee, provide for administrative support for the committee, and will designate chairs or co-chairs of each committee. Any policy changes implemented as a result of the work of these task forces will not be rescinded without a similar public process. The 4 committees are: 1. Investment Policy Disappearing Task Force. A disappearing task force is not a task force that is granted the power of invisibility on demand, but rather is set up to dissolve itself at a certain point in time. This task force, disappearing, albeit charged with proposing revisions to investment policies, including new proposed language on socially responsible investments/divestments. The task force will develop a definition for socially responsible investing. The DTF will address divestment from companies that profit from gross human rights violations and/or the occupation of Palestinian territories. What exactly are these Palestinian territories? Who decides what they are? How does a little college in the woods in Olympia, Washington, understand the territorial disputes of an ancient civilization, well, several ancient civilizations that have gone on in perpetuity since the dawn of recorded history, or at least the foundation of the ideology that this particular cult has mutated out of, being Judeo/Christianity. To continue, the task force will work with the foundation and the college to establish the soonest time recommendations can be made and acted upon. The task force will convene by the end of spring quarter 2024. Recommendations are due in fall quarter 2024 for consideration by the foundation and the college, with the implementation of the divestment policy to begin during spring quarter 2025 and completed by spring 2026. Now, again, I don't doubt the administration's dedication to this project. They love committees. I mean, this is what happens every single time that, at least at Evergreen, but I think across the world, the protesters get their way. They get their way insofar as it expands the bureaucratic process. It expands the job of the institution, or it expands the bloat of the institution. But for how long are the students going to be dedicated to sitting in on these committees? Will they be given free food? Will they be given a stipend in order to make it worth their time? Because they will run out of gusto. This is a spring fling that they're having with Gaza. I really highly doubt that any one of them will dedicate their summer all the way to September to this task force disappearing, albeit. So the students will make that task force disappear, or they will disappear from the students. They will ghost the task force, I'm pretty sure, because they're not getting any power themselves. What's in it for them? Getting the college to do this is enough for them. And I can show you footage a little bit later on of them celebrating Evergreen's divestment from Israel, whatever that means. So somehow this task force is going to figure out what Palestinian territories are and who's occupying those territories in regards to some gross human rights violations. To continue, the task force will convene, blah, blah, blah. 2, this is the second committee, Grant Acceptance Policy Disappearing Task Force, charged with recommending a policy that would provide criteria for accepting or refusing grant funding based on the purposes of the grant. Criteria would include such considerations as whether grants facilitate illegal occupations abroad, limit free speech, or support oppression of minorities. The recommendations will be shared with the Board of Trustees promptly upon completion and circulated to the student, staff, and faculty email DL distribution list. This recommendation is due in fall quarter 2024, with implementation to begin during spring quarter 2025 and completed by spring 2026. Now, I have to guess what exactly this task force is about these grants, but I'm sure it's grants to study anything, like going to Israel, perhaps. Like any sort of grant that has anything to do with Israel or the oppression of minorities. Like who's going to decide like what is oppressing minorities and what isn't? Who's in control of these definitions of terms? Well, it's a lot of task forcing going on to figure all that out. The third committee, civilian oversight of the Police Department Disappearing Task Force, charged with proposing a new Police Services Community Review Board structure. The new structure may include multiple recommendations. Among those recommendations will include updates to the Police Services Standard Operating Procedures to include the role of the Police Services Community Review Board. The President's Office will support members of the committee who wish to attend the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement's annual meeting in Tucson, Arizona on October 13th to 17th. So at least somebody's getting a free vacation to Arizona out of this task force. Recommendations are due to executive leadership by the end of winter quarter 2025. Well, they're really pushing that one out, with implementation to begin during fall 2025 and completed by fall 2026. It is a perpetual agitation movement for the students that are involved at the protests at the Evergreen State College to blame everything on the police and want to fiddle around with police law. So I don't know what specifically they want done. They just want more oversight. 4, alternative models of crisis response disappearing task force, charged with proposing a new non-law enforcement model for 24-hour crisis response that provides for medical care, de-escalation, and the tools, equipment, and culture that will best serve our community. Recommendations are due to executive leadership by the end of winter quarter 2025, with implementation to begin during spring 2025 and completed by 2030. So they want, if a crisis happens, exactly, by which they mean if the students take over the building and start taking people hostage like they did in 2017, whatever caused them to want to have it done right now, probably just like being very rude to people walking to and from classes while they're trying to have their solidarity moment with people in Gaza. How are they going to see this through? What is it going to be And none of these students are going to still be around in 2025. They barely go to class as it is. They're going to need a perpetual agitation, another revolution to get their goats going. Anyways, then this document says, make a statement. Now hereby the parties agree as follows. Make a statement. Okay, so here we go. The college will make a statement defending speech rights of students and others, including those doing Palestinian solidarity work. The full statement be reviewed by negotiators and a faculty representative before it is released. The subject line of the email will be, this is hilarious, this is compelled speech. It's a compelled speech about free speech. The subject line of the email will be statement for the president regarding the Red Square encampment and the ongoing humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. The following paragraph would be included. Like many, I am horrified and grief-stricken. Blink twice if you're being held hostage here, John Carmichael. Like many, I am horrified and grief-stricken by the violence and suffering being inflicted due to the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I wish to see an end to the violence and restoration of international law, including respect for the March 25 United Nations resolution. Specifically, the resolution called for a lasting, sustainable ceasefire honored by all parties, immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, expanded humanitarian assistance, and the protection of civilians. Additionally, I mourn the destruction of universities and hospitals. Additionally, I mourn the destruction of universities and hospitals, the killing of journalists, and want to see the release of any prisoner being held without due process. The statement will include an acknowledgement of the ICJ's genocide investigation and comments about U.S. weaponry. There's a lot of things that I disagree with Yarvin about, but Yarvin's take, Curtis Yarvin, he's got this blog called The Gray Mirror. His take on the whole thing is just stop caring about what's happening in Gaza and let it solve itself. That people millions or thousands of miles away from this conflict, caring about this conflict is continuing to degrade the possibility this conflict can be resolved. There's all this humanitarian aid going over there. There's all of this imaginary, I don't know. I mean, I don't know exactly what's happening over there. And I understand that some people are not on the woke social justice train that don't approve of what's going on over there. And it's a messy situation. And I feel like I'm supposed to be having a thought about it, but it's not a part of me, right? It's not connected to me. So to project myself into that situation, I don't see how I can help at all by projecting myself into that situation. I can see how me projecting myself in that situation could worsen the situation. But this little college in the wood wants to make a statement and tell this other country, these other sovereign nations what to do. It's like, that's really suspect. While at the same time, the college is giving all these land acknowledgements and just basically ceding territory, so the unceded territory of this tribe and that tribe. They don't even believe in the sovereignty of their own state. They're already eroding the sovereignty of their own state. And I guess the ultimate outcome of this is just like this perfect harmony Coca-Cola commercial of one world government. Like to, hear the world saying perfect harmony. However it goes. Anyways, so free speech and free association. I don't know why they're hammering on about free speech and free association. I bet the college students were acting beyond the pale and they were told not to act that way, and that was a violation of their free speech. I'm sure this is what it is, because they don't really care about free speech. Free speech now matters for them, and it has to only matter because it allows them to behave however they want to behave. Free speech and free association. Evergreen affirms a fundamental principle of freedom of speech and free association. Faculty may associate with professional associations even if their views differ from the colleges. In academic institutions, we counter misinformation with information and open discussion and critical analysis of the issues. Faculty affiliations do not bind Evergreen to policies that limit free speech. Maybe this is about the professors that are Jewish, and there are several Jewish professors wanting to still have associations with the Jewish state, and the college is protecting them. Maybe. Going to continue discrimination based on shared ancestry. or ethnic characteristics. The college is required to comply with state and federal law, i.e. the Washington Law Against Discrimination, RCW 49.60, as well as Title V plus I is 6, Title 6, which prohibits discrimination based on shared ancestry or ethnic characteristics, including Jews and Palestinians. The college is obligated to take prompt and appropriate action to respond to harassment that creates a hostile environment, including Islamophobic and anti-Semitic harassment, as part of our compliance with applicable law. The other irony of this is that it's fine to hate on white people. Like, Anglophobia is totally fine and enshrined, but whatever. Maybe the college here is trying to take a stance like, okay, you can't go around and hating on Jews, right? Reconciliation. The college has made a temporary exception to the campus habitation policy over the last several days, but we will end that exception on Wednesday, May 1st by 5 p.m., which means the encampment will conclude at that time. As part of the decampment process, students will remove all material from Red Square and dispose of trash and recycling. Yeah, right. As instructed by facility staff, they won't do that. Remaining in the encampment after that time will leave students open to sanctions described in Students' Rights and Responsibilities. At this time, we have not received reports of violations of policy. If any reports are received, the college will investigate as described in the policy. And then this is the signed memorandum. Look at daily authorized student representatives of the students of the Evergreen Gaza Solidarity Encampment signed Elizabeth Frickus, Deshaun Issam, Alex Marshall, and Kuri Campbell. Duly authorized representatives of the Evergreen State College, Halle Cheva, and yeah, I can't read these signages. So this memorandum of understanding was accompanied by this email to the Evergreen community by John Carmichael, PhD, the current president of the Evergreen State College, that reads, Evergreen community, on Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024, our students began forming the Evergreen Gaza Solidarity Encampment on Red Square on the Olympia campus. As part of an agreement with the college, students ended the encampment on Wednesday, May 1st. I heard impassioned calls from students to issue a statement on the college's position regarding the catastrophe in Gaza. As part of the agreement reached between students representing the encampment and college administrators, I agreed to make this statement. Okay, so this is the compelled statement. Like many, I am horrified and grief-stricken by the violence and suffering being inflicted due to the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I wish this was a video. I want to read it in his voice or hear it in his voice. I mourn the destruction of universities and hospitals, the killing of journalists, and want to see the release of prisoners being held without due process. I wish to see an end to the violence and restoration of international law, including respect for the March 25, 2024 United Nations resolution that called for a lasting, sustainable ceasefire honored by all parties. I'm sorry, but the Abraham Accords, Trump, there wasn't all this stuff happening under Trump, and the stuff that's happening under Biden just goes and goes and goes and goes. So this World War III that we were promised under Trump, that all of these people at Evergreen State College were so certain was imminent when Trump got elected, it's coming under Biden. It's coming under the Democratic Party. Like, there's no strength to deter, to enforce international law. There's just mewling pleas for ceasefire. This is such a weak way of going about doing this. Either let it unfold or go in there and clean it up yourself. But just like appealing to international law isn't going to work. It's not going to work. You need strength. And this present administration that this college had celebrated and been so grateful when Trump got unelected or de-elected, to follow their phrasing, decampment. I don't know if that's even a word, probably is. English is phenomenal like that. But the stuff was going in the other direction under Trump. This international instability was going in the other direction under Trump. America is just not strong enough to enforce this so-called international law. Anyways, if they could just understand that they are part of the problem, these kids are part of the problem, This institution is part of the problem. Anyways, these administrators, this bureaucratic state is part of the problem. Anyways, restoration of international law also requires that the International Court of Justice fairly adjudicate charges of genocide. I share these thoughts as a member of this academic community, and I urge each of us to learn about the history of the conflict, the current conditions in Gaza, and to speak about what we learn. Given the role that the United States arms play in the conflict, we can do no less. Evergreen's Evans Library maintains resources for more learning. I'm just going to open link behind me. Oh, and it didn't. Okay, so it does have like a write-up, well, kind of like organization of different information packets on the so-called humanitarian crisis between Israel and Hamas, or Israel-Gaza. To continue. Beyond our individual responsibilities, Evergreen has responsibilities as an institution. In a time of war, the search for knowledge is more important than ever. Teaching in a time of war, like what? I guess it is a time of war, but it's always a time of war. I mean, if every conflict around the world is part of this peace process at Evergreen State College, there's got to be a good one. The Patchouli Accords or some shit. That it's always a time of war. But anyways, in a time of war, the search for knowledge is more important than ever. Teaching and learning require an environment that values free expression and the open exchange of ideas. The encampment at Evergreen is a powerful example of what peaceful free expression can look like. Defending space for free expression is a core responsibility of the college. Alongside this is the responsibility to provide for the safety of our entire campus community. I think this is more about the statement is more about like containing and defanging the protesters, because those people are the ones who are, I'm sure, the ones who are trying to shut down free speech. So I wonder why free speech is now so important to the institution, if it can be welded as a weapon to shape and direct the conversation that they want. But under George Bridges really wanted to shut down free speech. He hated that. We just covered that on Sunday in our Evergreen Watch Party, which we'll get back going up as soon as we have the time. Anyways, to continue. The agreement we reached brought an end to the encampment and marks the beginning of a new phase of work. You can find the full text of the agreement on our website here. Taking demands for divestment and alternative models of crisis response. Seriously, crisis response. They're having a hissy fit. It's not a crisis. Unless they're talking about the crisis in Israel, but they can't like send a bunch of de-escalating people over to Israel. They don't have the funds for that. Anyway, so this is about the protesters' behavior. So it's a crisis of their own making. Crisis response seriously requires that we grapple with the complexity inherent in these subjects. So we are now beginning a set of deliberate processes. I mean, this is all they have, committees and processes, where we can educate ourselves. That is ominous, and each other, even more ominous, to ultimately produce specific, actionable proposals. It's education with the purpose, right? I mean, it's not teaching them how to think, but it's some sort of actionable purpose. So they're going to educate ourselves and others in order to do a specific actionable proposal. What is that proposal? I don't know, other than more committees and more memorandums of agreement and calls for international law. For this work to be successful in creating positive change, we will need more than free expression. Free expression is rarely an end in itself. In an academic institution, free expression is a necessary condition to the quest for knowledge. What? Beyond free expression, we need the capacity to listen to each other, embrace inconvenient complexity. Yeah, this is really about the protesters because they're idiots. Embrace inconvenient complexity and welcome other points of view. Let us be especially on guard against Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. Islamophobia is capitalized. Anti-Semitism is not. But I don't know. I hope anti-whiteness is a part of their thing because they're super anti-white, or at least everything that I was exposed to as a student in the Evergreen State College was aimed to shame the whiteys. Anyways, let's be especially on guard against Islamophobia and anti-Semitism as we engage with each other in this moment. I am deeply grateful to the students, faculty, and staff who helped the college navigate the past weeks with integrity and fidelity to our mission. They fill me with hope for the work ahead. Sincerely, John Carmichael, President of the Evergreen State College, 2700 Evergreen Parkway, Northwest Olympia, Washington, 98505. This is an email response by Mike Peros, who's this wonderful, tetchy professor of science at the Evergreen State College. He's been standing up for actual so-called classical liberal values since before the incident in 2017. He's still there. He's plugging away. He's an excellent guy. He's a veterinarian, and he's a really good teacher. And he writes, John, did Bridges teach you how to be a spineless coward, or did you develop a complete lack of dignity all on your own? Free speech is the exact opposite of compelled speech. I would respect you more if you actually believed what you wrote in the statement. Many people have given their lives in the name of freedom of thought, refusing to make denunciations or statements that they don't agree with. While your lack of courage and principle disgusts me, mostly I feel sorry for you. Please read how the University of Chicago president upheld principles of university neutrality and free speech in an honorable way. I don't expect you to understand the virtues of honesty, but you do need to make an apology to Nancy Koppelman. I'm sure some Jewish students will leave as a result of the college supporting terrorist organizations. Assurances of support might be helpful. As for me, anything you tell me I don't really trust. How could I when I know that your words aren't yours at all? Nancy Koppelman is a Jewish professor who probably had a run-in with these Hamas supporters. She's openly, anti-Semitic and was always disturbed, even though she ended up going after Brett Weinstein foolishly in an open letter that I covered earlier on in Expose Evergreen. Nancy Koppelman, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. It's really early here. Nancy Koppelman has probably been under fire, and even during the 2017 protests was very aware that there's this strong anti-Jewish sentiment among the protesters. Imagine that. Signed, Mike. P.S., to continue, does this mean that you will make a pro-life, pro-Israel, or Trump-supporting statement if protesters encamp on Red Square? I will draw up some demands in my next email. Let me know when you want to negotiate. I prefer pepperoni and sausage on my pizza. Likely a reference that the kids were given a bunch of food while they encamped, and now they just left a big mess. Anyways, I don't have anything else other than one photo that shows spray paint all over Les Perce building, which is like a building, like the lecture hall where that was dedicated to the president before George Bridges, who actually happened to be black, and they're spray painting all over that about, the usual things. And then I have video footage, which I will leave you with, of the students celebrating Evergreen's so-called divestment from Israel and, Israel and, or Zion or whatever. And, that was the one bone that Evergreen was able to give in order to market itself to the students that it wants to get, which are these protesty students who just make life hell for everybody else. So, Evergreen is literally sleeping in a bed they made, and let's look at that orgy in that particular bed. See you later.